Well, thank you very much. Last year, you may recall that we had an opportunity just to share a couple of minutes, Doug Peterson and myself, Doug Peterson at that time representing FUE, about this project. And we presented in Minneapolis at the National Farmers Union event. What I'm here today to do is to give you an update of what's happened since the past year. For those of you who don't know, Catholic Rural Life is a national Catholic organization that works in rural communities, and we've been doing that for over 93 years. We work ecumenically, we work across faith groups to support family farms, to support agriculture and food production, because food security is so important for our nation, and also as president of the International Catholic Rural Association for our world. So I've come here as a representative of rural communities and as an ally with what you all are doing today. We have three program areas: food and ag, environmental stewardship, and rural ministry and outreach. What I want to focus on today is on this story about the vocation agricultural leader. And I'm just going to give me a couple minutes to tell you this quick story. I was asked to go to an international meeting in 2012 on rural life issues in Rome. There were 147 delegates from 47 countries, and there Cardinal Turkson, Peter Turkson, announced this document. It was called The Vocation of the Business Leader, applying faith into the ethics of business decisions. And it was a 32-page document. We read it as a group in this large meeting. And afterwards, I went up to His Eminence and I said, you know, this is a great document, but what we need is a vocation of the agricultural leader. And he said, that's a great idea. You do it. And as a small nonprofit, you know, it was kind of overwhelming at first. But I came back to the United States and I talked to Farmers Union Enterprises. And I presented this concept to the 5 presidents. And they said, let's do it. Let's create this document. Let's talk to farmers. And so in partnership with the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace based out of Rome, the International Catholic Rural Association, Catholic Rural Life, and Farmers Union Enterprises, we began this process. Now, let's just take a step back. But why now? Why is this so important? And as you all know, today, the world produces more food than ever before. There are some incredible advances in technology and machinery, and models of heightened efficiency have combined to create bountiful yields. But there are some real problems too, as you all know this firsthand. The challenges that family farms are being squeezed out of existence by powerful market forces. Environmental degradation, we're seeing some soil, water, and air challenges as a result of intensive production. And there are also some impacts regarding climate change and agriculture related to that. So Pope Francis, in 2015, wrote a letter to the world. It's called an encyclical, like those first century letters in the New Testament. This letter is meant to be circulated. And he wrote it to address a modern problem of some of the environmental challenges. And it was entitled, Praise Be in Care of Our Common Home. But he addressed this to the whole Christian family. And he also said, I want to address every person on the planet about what's happening around the world. And he wanted to create a dialogue to begin to talk about these problems. Now, if you just read what was in the newspapers or heard on the radio or television, you think that letter is all about climate change. But do you realize food and agriculture is mentioned in that letter as many times as climate change? But I never saw a headline that said Pope talks about food and agriculture issues. Unfortunately, that was not the hot topic. But he talked about addressing water, soil pollution, looking at an ecological conversion grounded in the church's teachings. How do we care for this common home for the future generations and pass on farms to the next generation so they can be fertile and productive? So that letter came out, and as we were developing this document, we came up with 3 purposes, and some of that was informed by this letter and some other input, but we wanted to do three things. One was to develop a resource offering key principles for agricultural leaders like yourselves, showing how to apply ethical principles to day-to-day operations. To affirm and honor the significant role farmers, ranchers, and food leaders serve in providing food for our world. And to help inform ethical management decisions for current and future leaders, to inspire the next generation of men and women that agriculture is a great vocation, a great job to move into, that it isn't just for second-class citizens. Agriculture is so key and important. And to have men and women like yourselves who can inspire the next generation. I had a young woman from Purdue University come up to me after I spoke at a national conference, and she says, I never knew the church was even interested in agriculture. And she goes, I study at Purdue University, I'm in agricultural sciences, but there's nothing here that talks about faith. It's all just in terms of a very secular education. I didn't know even faith community cared about this. Now, what we did as Farmers Union Enterprises and Catholic Rural Life is we decided to develop a plan of doing several conferences. We did a national conference in November 2014. Some of you were participating in that. I know Roger was. I think we had representatives from about 14 states. Over half, 75 participants were farmers. And we had 2.5 days to reflect on these issues. And then we presented to farmer groups around the country. And then we did an international presentation in France and spoke to 80 farm families in France in February of 2015. And then we did an international symposium in Milan where we had this large gathering, about 65 leaders from 20 countries participate and talk about these problems and issues. And then we went around and developed a draft and had some focus groups with groups of farmers in California, in Iowa, and across the country. And then Cardinal Turkson, who was the president of the International Catholic Rural, the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, he spoke at Ohio State University in October 2015 using this draft document in his text. And he spoke to over 5,000 folks at the University of Ohio. And then, actually, Ohio State, the Ohio State University. I'm sorry, I got to correct myself. For all those from Ohio, I'm sorry, please forgive me. In Columbus. And then we had an opportunity to go to Livingston, Zambia. And there, the World Farmers Organization was hosting their international meeting. And there were about 200 representatives from across the world. And we were on this very large panel and spoke on some of these concerns, but then the actual very fertile dynamic that occurred there is having all these different conversations with these farmers across the world and sharing these vision about the vocation of agriculture leader and hearing their stories from Uganda, Zambia, Indonesia, and all over the world. Now, I'm just going to share some highlights from the document. The document has been published. You can order it. I've got cards out in the back. If you'd like a copy, we'll send it to you. It's a 32-page document, very accessible. But let me just highlight a couple things. One is, farming is a unique vocation. It's one of the first vocations. I mean, it even predates the fall, to till and to tend. You all hold such a crucial role in society and a unique role in the fulfillment of God's plan. Your work's not merely an effort to meet a basic human necessity, nor is it just an economic endeavor reducible to solely questions of profit and cost. And the pressures right now is that your role is being reduced. At its core, it's a commitment to agriculture as a vocation given by God, a unique and privileged way of life. Oops, I just went. At the heart of a sound vision of agriculture lies the theology of creation, a theology that the land, the earth, is a gift given by a loving creator. You all know this, working that land. The land's not a blank slate. It's not a meaningless void, merely waiting for the human being to impose his or her design upon it. No, the entire order of creation, from the lowliest creatures up to the humankind, is permeated by God's loving design. Agricultural life unfolds within this plan within this dynamic. In particular, the farmer, men and women who attend to the soil, enter into a relationship with God, an order of creation that is itself already intelligently ordered by him. I mean, the mystery of a seed turning into a plant, the mystery of a calf being born. You all know this. But also, agricultural production unfolds within a community of network of social relationships that often extends beyond the immediate horizon of one's awareness. Agricultural leadership then must recognize the dignity and contributions of every member involved in the food production and include the legitimate contributions of those historically who've been excluded. By viewing the practice of agriculture as a vocation with social and ethical dimensions and public policy implications, we know that the circle of concern ought to extend as broadly as possible. And Farmers Union knows this. That's what you do so well in advocating on behalf of farmers, being the voice of those who aren't heard. The agricultural leaders responsible for contributing to a vision of food system in which the various participants are treated with dignity and justice. Now, just quickly, a couple principles that come out of this document. One is gratefulness for the natural resources, for the clean water, and all that God's provided. Stewardship, care for the natural resources. Generosity, willingness to provide for others. Also affirming and protecting family farms. Why it's so critical to keep families in rural communities, on the land. And in food security and food sovereignty. How we can continue to help our nation and other nations to be food secure and to be able to grow what they want to grow, what they can grow. And also to respect the dignity of farmers and all who are involved in agricultural production. And from aspiration to practice, so what? So it takes an ecological conversion, meaning looking at the land as something as a gift. And I challenge you. I think that changes everything when we begin to look at our land as a gift and not just something that's mine, but it's a gift given by God, and then I can hand it on to the next generation. Also recognizing the earth's limits and how to work with nature in ways that are productive. But also a holistic approach, whole farm, whole community, whole food system, and seeing that whole system as opposed to just one part of it. Here's a challenge. The complexity of these challenges will call forth humility and dialogue. You guys do dialogue really well. You convene, you bring together. But I challenge also to bring in a faith dimension, to allow that, humbly listen to the message of God, our neighbors, and creation itself, becomes the ultimate way in which these challenges will be met. Dialogue with God in prayer and contemplation, dialogue with our neighbor in justice and solidarity, and dialogue even with creation in humility, wonder, and gratitude. It will demand our earnest prayers and prayers for vision, for courage, for hope, for steadfast service to one's family, neighbors, and future generations. A woman who's a veterinarian, she was the president of the World Farmers Organization, she was talking about Zambia. She said Zambians graduate from the university, they grew up on farms, but they have no desire to go back to the family farm. She said that they see that as a second-class citizens, farmers as second-class citizens, and they don't desire to be a part of that. They don't want to go into farming. That sounds so familiar. We need to inspire and to give a vision for the next generation of men and women who are studying agriculture. Now, as Roger mentioned, we had the privilege of sharing with Pope Francis this document on December 10th, 2016. And Doug Peterson accompanied me, he was the president of Farmers Union Enterprise at the time, to an audience with Pope Francis where Pope Francis affirmed the work that we were doing and the importance of family farmers. And he even gave an illustration of an olive grower that he had encountered about 3 weeks prior to our meeting, and talking about his interest in that farmer's relationship to his orchard and treating those olive trees like they were family. But he commended the work and said, keep doing what you're doing. Now, what Farmers Union Enterprises has agreed to is we're going to do another national conference, a broader one, bringing in faith communities, other faith communities, and having this dialogue with scientists, with theologians, with farmers, to talk about how do we instill this? How do we continue to, what are these implications of this as a vocation? And also now doing presentations to land-grant universities and agricultural institutes around the country. I was speaking to a group from the University of Minnesota on Friday, and a professor of horticulture was a part of this conversation. He heard the presentation. He goes, I want you to come and speak to our horticulture and agronomy departments. And so we're going to be doing, through the funding of Farmers Union Enterprises, doing presentations around the country to land-grant universities to speak to students across the faith spectrum, to challenge, to inspire, and to advocate on behalf of family farms. So I want to extend my appreciation for Farmers Unions, their partnership, their wisdom, and the support for these efforts. And again, I hope to report next year on our national conference and what the next steps are going to be. But again, this could not happen without the support of Farmers Union Enterprises and those individual states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. So I'm grateful, and thank you very much for your time. God bless.